All right, guys, so we are doing Concealer Week Roundup. I wanted to make one video to kind of summarize all my feelings and findings and thoughts on all the concealers that I covered over Concealer Week. There were 8 of them. So if you're interested in this sort of summary of concealers, then just keep on watching. All right, so it took me a bit to get this video up because I wanted to use all of the concealers again at least once to kind of make sure my first full day wear test wasn't either a fluke or that my opinion didn't change. And actually my opinion didn't change on any of these. I had the same results with all of these concealers the second time I used them, and the third time for some of these, and the fourth time for some of these. So I've been like, I don't know, hemming and hawing about how I was going to talk about all of these and how I was going to kind of sum everything up. So I think what I concluded with was nothing, basically. I think I'm just going to talk off the cuff, and hopefully this won't be too disorganized. But let me just first start by telling you about my under eye concerns. And when I did this Concealer Week, you probably noticed that I focused the concealer around my eyes. I didn't really use it on my face. I usually just rely on foundation to kind of cover up or camouflage my discoloration or hyperpigmentation that I have on my face. I don't usually add concealer unless I have something really bad going on, like a breakout or something. And even then, I kind of like to let it breathe a little bit. Anyway, so I focused it around my eyes. And my particular eye concerns is that I have dry eyes, both the lid and under eye. I have fine lines under my eyes. And then I just have this sort of general sallow discoloration around my eyes. What I don't have, which I know a lot of you do, and a lot of you use concealer for, is those like really dark kind of bluish purpley discoloration under the eyes. I just don't suffer from that, but I will try and speak to that a little bit because there are a few concealers in here that I think would be really, really great at kind of helping the discoloration. So anyway, those are my concerns, and that's sort of the viewpoint that I was coming from when I was testing these concealers. Also, I'm 44 going on 45, so I really like concealers that feel really nice under the eyes too. Long gone are those days where it was just about like really evening out skin tone or whatever. The texture of the concealer is now much more important to me than anything else. It has to feel really good, and if it has eye care benefits as well, then that's even a bigger plus. So that is where I'm coming from. So with that said, let me start with the concealer that really bombed out for me. And again, if you guys watched my Concealer Week, you will know this. This is the YSL All Hours Concealer. This one has, I want to say, the thinnest consistency out of all of these. And because of that, I think that is why it kind of just fell right into my fine lines. And while it seemed okay when I first put it on, it seemed thin, it blended out really, really nicely. The problem was because it's so thin, it kind of started to sink into my fine lines. And then by the time I checked in and by my final check-in, it totally sunk into my fine lines. And the second time that I wore this, it even started to make my under eyes look really, really dry, which I didn't even experience during my first full day wear test that I recorded for you guys. But you can see also that it has very little concealing as well. I don't need a really, really thick full coverage concealer. That's not something that I really enjoy either. But this, as you can see, once I blended it out, really wasn't there. I mean, it's very, very light. So light coverage, thin texture, emphasize my fine lines. This was definitely a no-go for me. So this was the big loser of Concealer Week. The concealer that I think had the most coverage is the Bobbi Brown Instant Full Cover Concealer. This also happens to be the thickest concealer that I tested. And I actually purchased this from the Bobbi Brown counter, and I had a nice long chat with the makeup artist there. The reason why it's so tacky is because it uses this technology to kind of stay above your fine lines so that it doesn't sink in. So this is literally like the exact opposite of the YSL concealer. It's thick, it's tacky, it takes a bit for it to blend in, but once it does, it has so much coverage. This is definitely the most coverage out of all of them that I used. And after I posted this video, a couple of you commented that I should use my fingers to blend this out, that the warmth of it really helps. So the following I used it 2 more times after that video. I used my finger to blend it out, and you guys were dead on correct as you guys usually are, and it definitely helped the blending process. The heat from your fingers really, really helps with this type of concealer. So this concealer also comes in a lot of shades, and there's all these different undertones. So depending on your concerns, depending on your skin tone, there's a lot of options. So I would definitely recommend going to a Bobbi Brown counter and actually getting matched, because this is not the color I would have picked for myself had I done online shopping, but this worked out really, really great for me. Now, this concealer definitely was not one of my favorites from Concealer Week. I think it's a great concealer. It didn't emphasize my lines. I think it does a great job concealing. But what I didn't like about it was that it didn't feel great, and I actually could feel it under my under eyes. I like ones that are very creamy, very nourishing. I tend to like a light to light medium kind of coverage, but I need something that's very, very nourishing under my eyes. So while I think this does a great job as a concealer, that's it. That's all it does. It just conceals. It doesn't feel great. There's no eye care in there. And so if that's your only concern, if you have a great eye care regimen and you don't need anything on top of it, then I think this is a great concealer. All right, next I'm going to talk about the 3 concealers that had the lightest coverage. The Clé de Peau Radiant Corrector for Eyes. This, I think, is the winner out of Concealer Week. I think you guys probably could have guessed that. I have talked about it, I think, relentlessly since then. So I'm just going to put this aside for now. The 2 other concealers I'm left with is the Dior Skin Forever Undercover Concealer. This one I really enjoy. I think this may be in number 2 or number 3. The number 2 or number 3 spot. This blends in beautifully, and it has a really lovely texture. It feels great. I don't know that it actually has any eye care per se, but it feels really, really nice. And I definitely don't feel it on my skin after it's been blended in. It doesn't have full coverage per se, but it definitely has like a light medium to medium coverage. So I like that. That is good enough for me. It didn't sink into fine lines. And this did a really great, great job camouflaging my lines. This is also one that faded by the end of the day, whether I powdered it or not. And I have worn this once more since that test, and the same thing did happen. So it did fade a little bit, I have to say, by the end of the day, which is not great. But I felt like whatever is in this formula kind of kept the camouflaging going. My fine lines still seemed blurred, even though the coverage was a little bit gone. So you could see the sallowness of my skin peeking through, but you couldn't see my fine lines peeking through. So this was a really interesting concealer. It was really, really lovely. I like this. But if you're looking for a lot of coverage, I don't think this is the one for you. Definitely not. I would definitely go with the Bobbi Brown. And then the La Mer concealer stick. So when I used this for the first time for the video, I was actually very, very surprised at how sheer the coverage was. I don't know if you guys can see, but once you blend it, it kind of just doesn't blend away, but it blends to a very, very sheer kind of coverage. That doesn't bug me too much because it does a good enough job where it's like a light to medium kind of coverage. It felt very nice under my eyes. I didn't find that it emphasized my fine lines or anything. But for a stick concealer, it is very, very surprising that it just doesn't have a lot of pigmentation. The couple of stick concealers that I use and that I love, like the Clé de Peau or the Surratt, those both have a lot of pigmentation. It's almost like you have to be careful not to put too much on. This was surprisingly light. So I used this once more and I thought, all right, well, let me just build up the covers. Let me just get this concealer going. And so I put on, I think like 3, I put this on, I think like 3 times. I like put a layer on, blend it in, put a layer on, blend it in, and thought, let me just put on another layer. At that point, this concealer goes very, very bad. It starts to make your under eyes look very dry. It does at that point start to emphasize fine lines. So I definitely wouldn't recommend building up this concealer. At 2 layers, it was okay, but this is just a kind of a weird product because 1 layer, I liked it. If you don't need that much coverage, if you just want a little bit of like evening out of your skin tone, this is fine. But I think if you're looking for like a concealer, like one with like coverage, and you like go for a stick concealer for that reason, this is not for you. It's just an odd combination of properties. It being a stick and it having kind of like light coverage, it's kind of weird. But if you like a light coverage, you're okay with just like 1 light layer of this. It does like a decent job kind of just evening out uneven skin tone. This is nice. I just would not start layering this for more coverage. It doesn't look very good after that. And then let me talk about the La Prairie. This was a very interesting product. So this is the La Prairie, kind of like their concealer, but I think that the other properties of this pen are a little bit more outstanding. The illumination, the hydrating, the skincare, all those things. This is the most highlighty concealer out of the bunch. This one has a very strong kind of like pearl luminescent highlighty quality to it. I'm not even sure that I realized it when I first put it on that day, but I'm gonna go ahead and swatch some on the back of my hand here because you can only really notice it in direct light. And I have a very thin layer on the back of my hand, but can you see that? There's like a pearly finish to this concealer. It also has a very, very kind of like brightening aspect to it, and it definitely has a little bit of coverage. I want to say it's like a light medium coverage to this, but I think what is so outstanding about this product is the brightening and the illuminating qualities of that. And this is definitely, I stayed away from anything that was like illuminating under the eyes. I thought, I don't know if I like that. I feel like it's just going to make me look sweaty under there. It's going to make me look like I just had spicy food and is sweating under my eyes. And anything that's that reflective, I thought would really kind of emphasize my fine lines, something that I'm always trying to camouflage. But one of you had commented that I should try the Charlotte Tilbury Hollywood Flawless Filter under my eyes, under my concealer. And I tried that one day and it really did look very, very nice. It just sort of brightened up my entire face by just brightening up under here. It was almost like I had like lights kind of like shining up into my eyes. It made my eyes look brighter. It was a very, very cool effect. So that's what this pen does. It has like a very light coverage, but it almost does all these other things to your eyes. And so if you don't need a lot of coverage, but you just want brightening and you want like a light coverage, a light camouflage, and an illumination, this is the guy for you. And I've used this a couple times since concealer week. And it wasn't only until maybe like the end of the second day and the third day that I tried it. And it was like, you know, I kept looking in the mirror like, God, like my face just looks so good. Like there's such a brightness to my face, and I just couldn't like figure out what it was until I realized that this actually has like a pearlescent finish to it. It was like I just didn't even see it. I was so focused on like coverage, you know, whether it was a light medium coverage. I was so focused on how it felt. It feels really, really good under the eyes as well. It has a very creamy texture. So I like this, but this is very different from any of the other quote unquote concealers that I have. Very, very different, but I like it. And then I have these two concealers, which are kind of similar in my mind. They have a very similar coverage, which is definitely at least a medium. And this is the Kogan Do Moisture Fit Concealer, and this is the Guerlain Multi-Perfecting Concealer Hydrating Blurring Effect. So I'm just going to put some of the Kogan Do here, and then I'm going to squeeze some of the Guerlain out here. Now the shades are very different. The Kogan Do is much peachier, as you can see, and the Guerlain is a little bit more neutral. But these both have similar tack to them. They're not as tacky as the Bobbi Brown, but they are tackier than any of the other concealers that I've talked about. So I want to say in terms of coverage, these are right behind Bobbi Brown. I don't think that these have as much as Bobbi Brown, but definitely very close. And if you don't need something with as much coverage as Bobbi Brown, I would opt for one of these. Like if you still want coverage, I would opt for one of these because I think that these feel better because they're not as tacky, they're not as sticky. I don't feel it, it's not as obvious as the Bobbi Brown under the eyes. The Kogan Do I thought did a better job all day. When I put both of these on, in the beginning, they both seem really great. You know, they do a great job camouflaging, they do a great job covering, but by the end of the day, I felt like the Guerlain was a little bit dry. It emphasized my fine lines a little bit, where I did not feel that way with the Kogan Do. So if you want something with some more coverage than the other ones I've been talking about, I would say go for one of these. I really like the Kogan Do. This one I would opt over the Guerlain, but they're both very nice. And then last but not least is the Clé de Peau Radiant Corrector for Eyes. This one is my favorite out of all of these. If I were to pick for you which ones to get, like these 4 are my top 4. The Dior, the La Prairie, and the Kogendo Moisture Fit along with the Clé de Peau. These 4 are like the top half. After that, I like the Guerlain and the Bobbi Brown. If I needed a lot of coverage, the Bobbi Brown would definitely be in my top 4. I just don't personally need this much coverage. The La Mer, it's too confusing. It's okay, it worked for me, but it just, as a stick concealer and trying to build it up didn't work out. I just didn't like this. And this was a clear loser for me. But the Clé de Peau is like almost like the perfect concealer for me. It has a light to medium coverage. It feels really great. It's super creamy. It blends in easily. It has skincare benefits. It camouflages. It's like nourishing. It's just a really, really great under eye product for me. And it's what I have on my eyes today. I feel like I can set it with powder. I don't have to set it with powder. It works both ways, and I just love how comfortable it feels. I don't feel it on my skin. I really don't like when I can feel my makeup. I think it's just a terrible, terrible feeling. So this is completely weightless, and it feels like an eye cream. So that is my concealer week wrap up. I hope you found it. Yes? Yes, dear? So that is my concealer week wrap up. I hope you found that useful. Definitely let me know if you have questions down below in the comments section. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. Subscribe before you leave, and I'll see you in my next video. Hi, baby. What you barking at?